and welcome everyone to the Tech Poutine pre-show. It's been a hell of a week. It's been a hell of a week.
So before this, my main computer was not turning on, so I'm currently on my laptop.
You've still got an external webcam. At least you're not on your webcam.
Yeah.
At least you're not on your laptop camera.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you, but most of my week has been covering everybody's financials regarding all their quarterly statements and announcements and spend. As Daniel DC88 says, if AMD's good, why stock go bad? It's interesting, the thumbnail for this. I could have used Intel. Intel also had a good set of numbers. And we'll go through both AMD and Intel just because they're companies that we follow on both of our channels. With regarding the finances, there's going to be a coverage of who might be Intel's new CEO. There may be a link to something that's going on in the industry. We'll cover that. And George and the people over at Chips and Cheese has reviewed a brand new RISC-V processor. Well, brand new.
Well,
one of the first reviews of the RISC-V processor.
So, okay. So I don't know if you noticed, Sci-Fi actually retweeted our P550 coverage.
The one that really dumped on him?
The first one, not the performance comparison.
Just the architecture.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever get a response back from them?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
So,
Martin, if you're watching, email George. He needs an email back. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that's a bit weird. Yeah. And I mean, this week it's still the continuation of DeepSeek, which we covered on last week's Tech Routine. That's still been going on. Every CEO under the sun is talking about it and what it means for build out in AI, which means we get more conversations about AI. We also had the 5080 launch just after the last routine.
Actually, we talked about it on the last podcast.
Okay. I thought we spoke about the 5090 numbers. Anyway, oh no, sorry. They were available at retail if you're a bot.
I think
I saw one report that said the European stock of the stock of Europe's biggest distributor was pre-sold by two bots, two scalpers.
I know. So the Tustin Micro Center for basically all of Southern California had like 68 5090s and like 250 80s, which is very short stock for that store.
So I was watching somebody and they said at their local, they had something like 68 cards between the 5090 and 5080. 10 and 58, I think they said. And the person who was number 4 in line sold their spot in line for $1,500.
So what you're saying is somebody paid nearly almost $4,000 for a 5090.
You're assuming they bought a 5090, they could have bought a 5080.
Then why get number 4?
Because that's the only person who was selling, I guess. It's and we heard of people queuing 18 hours. I know in the UK the big retailers, essentially it was in-store only, but their stores are warehouses on industrial sites in the middle of England. So overclockers and scan and what have you. And everybody's talking about this is a paper launch. Why bother launching it if you can't buy it in volume? And companies do this partly to inflate the price, but also because Nvidia would rather sell you a H100. They'd rather use a silicon to go sell a H100, right? You ain't special, gamers. Sorry.
Unfortunately, true.
Nvidia may have increased revenue. AMD may have increased revenue in gaming. Unfortunately, yeah, it's that being said, I did crunch some numbers, and I think last year, in terms of AI GPUs, data center GPUs sold, Nvidia sold about 6 million. AMD sold about 250,000
for data center GPU.
Yeah,
interesting.
Something like that, or it may have been more like 400,000 for AMD. I may be working backwards off of a slightly different number, but yeah, it's more than a 10x difference, right? Easy, or in that case, yeah, that's a 24x difference. But yeah, it's gamers are important in the sense that they're legacy important, but in reality, demand for other chips is so high. The only way you're getting consumer chips is if there's something else in the supply chain that is restricting volume of data center
HBM.
It could be HBM, it could be packaging, it could be something else in the mix. It could be like this tiny IC, or it could be Ajinomoto build-up film. Maybe the factory's on fire again, that sort of thing. You remember that, don't you? From a few years ago.
Yes, I do. Yes.
ABF, this critical component for chips that's made by a factory that produces MSG as its main revenue, monosodium as a foodstuff, was the only company in the world that made this high performance film needed for high performance processors, and they only made it in one factory in Japan that caught fire. So one of the reasons for the lack of stock during crypto phase was because of that.
That's funny.
So it's compounding, right? But yeah, no, it's the fact that it's Ajinomoto build-up film, ABF, is made by the same people who you buy bags of MSG from at the Asian supermarket. It's just hilarious to me. I mean, it's like Samsung, or is it no, Toyota, or is it Hyundai? Well, one of them. You can get this thing which is delicately engineered, or a tank.
Yeah, no, that's Hyundai.
Yeah. So I was going to say Samsung, and Samsung maybe makes tanks.
Yeah, you can get this Hyundai Santa Fe or this K9 Thunder artillery piece.
Yes. one of which will get you to work on time. The other of which will remove work from your life forever. Remove your workplace. From your life forever. Yeah. So paper launch on the discrete GPUs. They sent a bunch out. I saw comments saying the only way to get it is to build up a YouTube channel for 18 months and then Nvidia will sample you one.
I wasn't even sampled one, so
no, it's I wasn't. And I'm still trying to get a ticket to GTC, and they've given me a voucher, and that's really weird for analysts, and I need to sort that out. But I'll be in town for GTC, which is mid-March, 17th or something of March. So I'll be in the area for that. I wonder if I don't get a pass and I just sit out or stand outside with a tin, rattling some coins.
So Nvidia also wanted to give me a voucher, but luckily Jeff from Craft Computing has snuck me in under him as the cameraman.
No, not snuck you in. You're working for him, so that's what you need.
Yeah.
So, with that, let's get into the show. Let's go into a full show mode if we can. You ready? Waiting for the banner to change. There we go. So, welcome everyone to the Tech Poutine. This is episode number 17. This is your weekly show about chips and other stuff we find interesting in the market because we're nerds and we like silicon. Actually, there's a great grok-generated image of me eating silicon. I think I'll flash up later. It could be my new profile picture. It's amazing. So I am Ian, your co-host from More Than More and Tech Potato, and joining me as always is.
Hello, I'm George from Chips and Cheese, and yeah,
go like and subscribe his stuff. Yeah, and if we had a guest, there'd be Gravy that's making the poutine. But we don't have a guest this week. We did last week. If you didn't catch last week's, we spoke with Sally Wolf-Foxton from EU Times. You should definitely go check that out. She's great at explaining. But yeah, let's get into it. We've got a few topics for this week's show. And the first topic is going to be a surprise to George. Or at least he knows what the topic is, but he doesn't know what I'm going to say. Because less than 2 hours ago, I had a group Q&A with AMD's Lisa Su, CEO and president of the board, Lisa Su. This is part of just their engagement with the analyst community. It's a fully on the record conversation. She was in a meeting room with Varsi, who heads up their AI efforts, and a couple of other AMD people. And on the call was over 100 analysts from around the world, Europe, US, Asia. So of course, it's always wrong time of the day for someone. But the idea is that we just had AMD earnings, and the financial analysts got their chance for Q&A. This is now just a chance for the industry analysts to have their Q&A. And it's a fully open on the record conversation, and they don't know the questions going in. And I didn't know my question until 2 minutes before I asked it. So there's that as well. So I want to go over kind of what she said, because we actually do have a few small announcements coming out of that conversation. It's only an hour. AMD is in the process of basically setting up a monthly round table with one of the executives or engineers, and it just so happens that the right time of the year is now for Lisa Su, given that most of us didn't see her at CES because she was at Frontier launching El Capitan launching the new number one's world supercomputer in terms of performance with all their new hardware stuff. So I'm going to go through. I made a transcript of it. I'm not going to share this transcript, but I will explain what she was saying to everyone. And to start off, we have prepared remarks. So number one, so much has happened to the first 4 weeks of the year. Understatement. I actually had a meeting.
Understatement of the fucking decade to be one.
I had a meeting an hour ago with another client of mine, and that says, "Oh yeah, I totally forgot administration changed because of all the other stuff that's happening in the tech space." But yeah, it's so a key point was that AMD took their AI data center business, this Instinct business. I keep wanting to say Radeon Instinct, but it's not Radeon, it's just Instinct. From 100 million in 23 to 5 billion in 24. So 50xing the AI data center GPU business. And they're expecting to get record share in cloud and enterprise for Q4 on the CPU. So I think last quarter, Mercury said they were around about 30%. So they're expecting to go above that. That just means just out of all the x86 CPUs in the enterprise and data center market, how many of them are AMD? And you might think, why are they only at 30? Why aren't they at like 70 based on their performance and competitive positioning? Part of it comes down to pricing. Part of it comes down to solution. Part of it comes down to familiarity. There's the old phrase is you never got fired if you bought IBM. Then it was you never got fired if you bought Intel. And to a certain extent, that's still true. Incumbent business is strong in semis.
Yep.
They're saying that in terms of the EPYC CPUs, Turin, so Gen 5, Genoa Gen 4, and Milan Gen 3 are all selling well. And with their top cloud customers, those customers during 24 were more than 50% AMD, which is substantial, having having that sort of thing. Sebastian asks, how were the questions curated? First person to put up their hand gets to ask a question.
So it's like school again. First person to raise your hand gets the first answer.
Well, it's teams, right? So it's you just literally press the hand raise, and then it says what number in the queue you are, and I was number 2. And by the time I finished my question, I think they had number 17 on the list, and we only got to number 11 or something like that. So it's that sort of thing. Yeah, if it's a much smaller group, they'll just do round robin. Everybody gets one question, and then if people want to go around again, we have another question. But yeah, sometimes these questions take a good 10 minutes to answer as well, because they want to give flavor. And even then, with question 2, Lisa kind of already pre-answered my question with question 1. So there we go.
So should we get into?
Yeah, no, I was just moving my drink. It's been a long day, so I'm having a cider. Yeah,
that was me yesterday.
Client business had fantastic 24. Their big news is now they're in the Dell commercial business, which they announced at CES. So now commercial business is a longer sustained business.
So this is like their what used to be called the precision lineup, basically. So like their big workstation, their big.
Now it's Max Premium Pro.
Max, I think it's technically Max Pro, which can now have the Premium Pro or Basic branding. So like you can have.
I recorded a YouTube short on this, and even that just got me majorly confused. Yeah. Well, so okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to go through the questions and highlight stuff. So first question was from our friend Dave Altavia at Hot Hardware, Hot Tech Insights, I believe, or whatever they're called these days. I forget what the analyst is. Sorry, Dave. Insight into momentum on MI325X, MI350, because these 325X is now shipping for revenue, and MI350 is probably early silicon is in the hands of partners. The A0 stuff. So yeah, first instant, we're now expanding the breadth of customers. Because 300 and 325 are a family, it's the same chip, but just with better memory. It means that customers either go for one or the other. They don't tend to go for both. But 325, if you need it, offers better performance and TCO. Over months, they're expanding their customers and they're tracking that expansion growth. And the conversation, if you can use memory capacity and bandwidth, it leads. The conversation has been about how hard it is to use AMD, which is something George is very, very intimately familiar with.
Yes.
And they highlighted that through the year, they focused on ROCM in terms of inference for their key customers. So they said the number of customers who are getting an out-of-box experience within a week has been great. They're confident about inference, and for 2025, they're going to put a big effort into supporting the training ecosystem, which may be a nod to what 350 is going to be focusing on. So it turns out their customers are saying, we love you for inference. What can you do for us on training? So
I know. So we didn't really get to do any training testing. So if you want to learn our perspective on MI300X and MI300A, we have articles on both of them. But in terms of training, I know that one of the big things that was holding AMD back was there's this operation known as an all reduce. Essentially, when you train, you have to conglomerate all your training data and reduce it all and then send it back out. I know that on some earlier versions of ROCM, it was quite poor. That sounds like it's been improved, but another big thing for AMD on the training side is they need to get those new Pensando NICs out quicker, because the faster that they can transition off of ConnectX and off of sort of the NVIDIA ecosystem in terms of the node-to-node fabric, the better for them.
Yeah. Or other Ethernet solutions, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, so we actually cover that a little bit going forward. Just for a point of clarification here, when George says or reduce, if you've never done any mathematics before, a reduction is a mathematical operation. It basically means taking a series of numbers, like 1, 3, 5, 8, 3, 2, 8, 6, 1, 2, and basically adding them all together. And because of the way computers add numbers together, you have to do it in a way which maximizes accuracy. For example, if your accuracy is only 6 digits and you have 3 million and you add 3, your answer is still 3 million. So you have to add, pairs of numbers together and then pairs of the results together. And an OR reduce is essentially going across your whole infrastructure and taking one value from each core and then adding it all together in a big loop. And in training, that tends to be what we call a synchronous function, a serial function. So it becomes a stop point for every GPU in your ecosystem, which means GPUs are going to be idle if some have finished work before others. And then you're also relying on the latency of the networking in order to do that operation. So in order to do a reduction across all of your data, so an OR reduce, that's usually a limiting factor in training. And there are now ways to do asynchronous OR reduce, so you can do it in separate parts of your infrastructure at different times, and then the data comes together. The reason why it's a synchronous operation normally is because you need the result of that calculation for the next step. And so smart people have found ways to get around that somehow. But yeah, in terms of customers and momentum, they had a couple of new AI companies at scale adopting AMD in the last month or two. Those will end up in revenue in the first half of the year. So,
so those announcements will be coming.
Yeah, they kind of mentioned it in the financials as well, which we'll get to after this Q&A. Yeah, that will be revenue likely realized in the first half of the year. When they say some at scale, we're thinking this is north of 1,000 GPUs, maybe up to 10,000. So then my question, which was arguably the one that took the longest to answer out of everybody's question, I essentially said, saying the main criticism we've had from AMD is the software side, getting up to speed. What can you explain what you primarily focused on in 2024, what the holes were in what you focused on, and if and when you plan to address them, or your goals for 25, so that I could go to investors and turn around and say, actually, AMD GPUs are easier to use because they now have a software stack. The problem is, if you're not a top tier customer, it can be quite hard. I highlighted the semi-analysis article recently about training, and the fact that in sometimes AMD engineers have to rent out time from clouds because they can't get access to the hardware internally in order to solve some of these things. So I asked essentially, what you doing all that? And Lisa said, we take all feedback seriously. Seriously, give us feedback. We love to hear it. This is, again, Lisa has spent time with the semi-analysis crew directly on what they did. She was keen to point out that their main focus was on training. And so one of the reasons why some of their content, if you haven't read it, were highlighting deficiencies in how it was working is because it was looking for a generalized training, and they haven't really deployed a generalized training containers and Dockers and everything else for the open source models yet, or at least not at the level that it needs to be for optimization. But they're 1,000% committed to ensuring that over time, people like me and George and everybody else can say ROCM is great. And she said,
Which, give it to me on client more.
that's what George needs.
Yeah.
So I said this 100 million in 23 to 5 billion in 24 revenue on AI GPUs. So she said for the right reasons they had to prioritize their large customers, the people who are buying $100 million.
Yeah.
So this is primarily OpenAI, Microsoft and OpenAI, or Meta and Llama. But also work on terms of PyTorch, JAX, Triton, and VLLM. So essentially, when you're building a software stack, we see this with startups all the time, especially if you're starting from scratch. You can build something that works, a skeleton, and then you go aside. Do I make this skeleton work for my customer who's spending money with me so I can stay alive, or everyone to use my stuff who may or may not buy stuff? Naturally, you're going to say, I need a design win first, so I'm going to focus my time on the customer. And so one of the reasons why, to George's dismay, and George, I'm talking about this George, not George Hotz. Cheese, I'm talking about cheese. It's so as much as we would like and they're also big fans of open source at some level. As much as we would like better integration for home labbing, for lack of a better term, for play and testing, as I'm sure a bunch of engineers in the industry would, they've really had to focus on the companies that are giving them money first. And one of the reasons why they haven't spent too much on training is because the customer demand for training wasn't there yet. But it is coming through in 25, so they're going to be focusing a lot on training. Regarding engineers not having access to GPUs, the point was made that it makes more sense to ship GPUs to partners, cloud providers, tier 1s, tier 2s, and then essentially lease them back. Because that way, the partner can deploy them in the data center, make sure they're up and running.
Yeah,
and then
that does make sense.
And AMD can essentially reduce the price of the hardware for the partner by saying, well, we want 8 hours a day back, and then you can resell the rest, whatever. And so while we might consider NVIDIA just has a bunch of GPUs internally, or Intel has a bunch of GPUs internally for their engineers to use, AMD's model is, we have some internally, but actually most of ours are in tier 2 clouds or tier 1 clouds. And that's what we use to help optimize this software. Simply there's not enough hardware out there. Engineers would use every GPU we would give them, and they would still complain they don't have enough. So this is the argument of, why don't you give your engineers more GPUs? Well, even if we give them more GPUs, they'll ask for more than that. So why not just stick them in the cloud and get people familiar with our hardware at that level first, essentially. So over the last several months, multiple cloud providers are coming out with GPU clusters in the 1,000+ range, used by AMD to tune their software. So that's pretty cool. And the priority of training workloads during 25, because that's where customers want them to go. The other point to see is to do more public Dockers for everyone. So instead of having AMD touch every customer and their data, they do want people to come and download stuff, right? They do want George to go and to download a Docker or Kubernetes or whatever, because it's out of the box.
So what I will say is, on their Docker side, AMD has, I think it's called Infinity Hub, and that was actually a pretty decent help in our MI our MI300A testing. And pulling down Docker containers from there actually made the process fairly easy. NVIDIA has something similar. I think it's called NGC. So yeah.
And she did say that they're going to start pushing new inference and training Dockers more optimized for models every 2 weeks, and they've already started to do that in 25.
Okay, that's good.
So their focus is to offer, two updates a month, bi-weekly, dual weekly, I don't know, whatever it is. I always forget which way around. And then, what is Vamsi's last name? I always forget. Vamsi Bapana, Senior President of the AI Group at AMD, essentially. So Vamsi was there, and he says, yeah, they're accelerating the pace of delivery. It's moving so fast. For example, DeepSeek. The minute DeepSeek came out, everybody wanted it to run it on everything. They actually highlighted this as a key benefit of AMD having lots of different AI silicon across their stack, because everybody wanted to run DeepSeek on Instinct GPUs, on the CPUs. I mean, you saw builds where people were putting 2 CPUs and a bunch of memory together and saying, look, I can get DeepSeek at 7 tokens per second. Also on Ryzen AI.
Hold on, Ian. Nick, I've just had a very stressful past 2 days.
George is tired. Yes. He's also a night owl, and this is
and I don't have my main computer up, so I'm literally having to I'm having to look between so
that's fine. That's fine. So there's big things we're doing falls into 2 buckets. One, low-level hardware close to metal libraries and kernels that have more support out of the box. And 2, ecosystem coverage, so new PyTorch libraries, new transformer libraries. They said part of the problem is most of the development of this software doesn't happen on AMD. So the competition gets it first because that's where it's developed. So they have to spend a lot of time porting it to AMD. What they want to change that so the community does their native development on AMD, or at least a portion of the community.
And this is why I've been pushing ROCM on client devices like this one. Like this, give it to me on this.
Yeah.
Especially on Strix Halo.
So so Vamsi said they want to be able to provide a single line compile ROCM in Q1.
So when he says that, does he mean for all ROCM devices? And will they be adding ROCM devices? Like, these are the questions that
I know, but you understand their focus on customer and enterprise before client.
Yes, but at this point, they need to start. We've had this discussion before.
No, I know. It's because Vamsi's focus isn't on client.
There needs to be more client focus, like I've said.
That's Jack's job.
Okay.
So, do you know if AMD has a dev cloud?
No, they don't.
So here's the first announcement. They are building a dev cloud.
Okay, because I know that they had something kind of like it, back when I remember MI 210 or 250. Michael from Pharonics had access to it. I can't remember exactly what it was called.
So they have an internal dev cloud, and that's mostly used, but it's small and mostly used for customers to do proof of concept before they do build out. So that's what I think Michael had access to. But what you will see is an AMD dev cloud, and the way I got Vamsi to clarify, does this mean you'll do a dev cloud? And he said yes. He made sure to be very careful in saying it's not necessarily on-prem AMD cloud. It will be resources that AMD has leased from other cloud providers, but your dev cloud access will be almost like an AWS access.
Okay.
As in you can pick which region.
Frankly, fine.
Yeah. But it's for those of you who don't know, like Intel's dev cloud, it's for people who want to try Intel hardware without buying it, or they just pay for cloud credits. And Intel is very good at giving things like students credits and stuff. So you can, you get like 24 hours with a Xeon Max box or something. But yeah, it's because they've been focusing more on customers. That's why. So yeah, end of my question. A lot of things were about. Okay, so a question here from Jim McGregor, our friends over at Tirius. The cycle of building models is short, but the cycle of hardware is long. The wafer agreements you have with TSMC, if there's suddenly a demand for a older product or a product that's more focused towards the low cost, like an MI, say there's suddenly demand for MI210 due to commoditization of AI, could you go and take the wafers you've already purchased at TSMC but haven't been manufactured yet and ask them to go do it for MI210? Is it fungible? Are the pre-sold wafers a fungible commodity? And she basically said yes, but because the cycle time through the fab is so long, you have to be more careful about what volume you want long term, because you have to predict it 6 months out, basically.
And actually, I kind of suspect, so to sort of a slight pivot over back to what we were talking about earlier with the 5080 and 5090 launch. We know that NVIDIA had some issues with the first run of Blackwell data center GPUs. I have a sneaking suspicion that what they did was they did essentially a hot run of DC Blackwell using client wafers, like wafers that were supposed to be for client.
A hot shot, basically.
Yeah. And essentially and that's why supply of Blackwell client was very low.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could absolutely see how that could happen.
Well, you also remember there was an earthquake in Taiwan.
Yes.
End of last year. And apparently that caused 40 to 50,000 wafers to be mothballed. That could have been the whole 5,000 series allocation quite easily. Yeah, so Lisa said, yes, it's fungible, but you still have to plan out very long. And Vamsi also adds in here, again, DeepSeek, in addition to people asking about the Instinct stuff, they were also asking, can you run it on Ryzen for the smaller models? And the fact that they have an end-to-end is important. There's a question here about Wi-Fi 8. The question was a bit weird. It was a bit mixture of x86 Council and ARM. And Lisa just said, look, we're a partner. We love to see our ARM. The ARM ecosystem is important to them because they use a lot of ARM IP in their stuff. So
yeah.
So CoPilot. So AIPC, the thing that George held, and the fact what we spoke about pretty much all of last year. AIPC. Funny thing, one analyst in Qualcomm's earnings suggested that Qualcomm had $100 million revenue on AIPC in December. Snapdragon X Elite having a $1.2 billion revenue run rate. That would be insane. Anyway.
That's why I went, that doesn't sound right in my head.
Yeah, 100 million for the year, maybe. Even then.
Yeah, that sounds a lot more correct.
So next analyst was Bob O'Donnell, asking about AIPC, and do things like DeepSeek change your approach on it? And Lisa just said, look, it's a little bit chicken and egg. Their view is that the NPU will be like GPU, as in when GPU first came out, people didn't know how to use it properly. Drivers were terrible. Applications were limited. And over time, it takes it. What they are seeing is, especially in the business market, everybody in the business market, when they upgrade, is going to AIPC. And that's just simply because it's better to have it and not use it than to not have it and need it. And they reiterated, Ryzen AI with full CoPilot support. They also highlighted Windows 10 end of life at the end of 25. So that may go up. Vamsi on this said that part of the problem is the initial applications were focused on consumer. However, they've been working 6 to 9 months on commercial. So things like VPNs and security and all the stuff that businesses need and consumers don't.
Stuff like Ryzen AI Pro. God, I hate that name.
And then Lisa also says about AI in enterprise, it's 2 buckets. First of all, the uses for AI right now. One is for cost optimization, such as taking mundane tasks and automating them, right? Improves productivity enhancements, lowers your operational expenses. So that's one use of AI. The second one is the use of AI to make products better. So new features, things that may actually be charged for, that sort of thing. And whenever I'm speaking with investors, this is usually the 2 factors I talk about. You either make stuff you're doing now better, which reduces your cost, or you make new stuff. Everybody asks about the killer app on the new stuff. People already talk about, well, hang on, I can now do 5 emails in the time I've done 1, or I've managed to summarize a document. There was a video going around recently of a student who was, our class was asked to watch 5 10-minute videos. And one of the students just put the video links into a AI summarizing engine and got all the results out in 2 minutes. And the lecturer got really mad at her. But this is the way business works, right? You have to know. Yes, but.
Yes, but I would argue that
there's always that nugget of information that isn't picked up.
Yes.
Like there's like a throw-off sentence or something that's not understandable to the machine learning algorithm, to whatever model you're using. So yeah. They also said they didn't give. So you may remember AMD at the beginning of 24 said we're going to make $1 billion of AI revenue, and then they said 2 billion.
Yes.
Then they said 4 billion. Then they said 5 billion, and they ended the year over 5. So of course the question was, are you going to give a number for 25? And they said no. The reason is, when you're going from near zero, you need to give a sense of scale. They have a $5 billion a year business. They don't need to give that scale on a quarter-to-quarter update anymore. So, then we had a question about the automotive market, and the end result is simply customers are essentially looking for complete solutions, not individual chips. So they have to work with providers building solutions to be included in them, but they have a strong footprint in auto. It's mostly in cabin entertainment, because they're in a lot of Teslas, for example. But they are in some autonomous driving, ADAS solutions, Subaru and several others, they said. But the whole point here
Subaru
is
was the one that I knew off the top of my head.
Then one question that's coming up is this movement between GPU and people designing their own chip. Amazon's got Graviton, and Trainium and Inferentia. Got Microsoft Cobalt. No, sorry, Microsoft Maya. Yeah. I always forget which one.
AI chip.
Because it's got AI in it. And then Google has a TPU and Axion and whatever. So is this pivoting people? Is GPU market share going down because people are doing custom chips? And Lisa just said, we see the market needs a whole bunch, but even our customers building these chips need a strong GPU base. So by the time we get out to 27, 28, this is when Lisa's predicted 500 billion a year in terms of spend, or in terms of the total addressable market for AI silicon. She
Yeah.
said most of that will still be GPUs. There will be some ASICs, but it's part of having a complete solution. Quantization, so going from 16-bit to 8-bit to 4-bit. They're saying that essentially when they enable if they want to enable quantization on, say, embedded platforms, they've already done a lot of the work in enterprise. So they have a solution that scales across all their silicon.
Yes, they just need to, support it, support the software stack.
Well, again, if you're a big customer, they will.
Yes, but
and they will handhold. Our friend Doug was talking about networking. So he said that your node right now is 8 GPUs. The competition is 72, and if you go to TPU, it's thousands. So Vamsi says you'll see an overall announcement roadmap going from 325 to 350 to 400, and the networking will scale up with increasing capabilities in that time frame. Now it does. You can get around some of what the competition is doing based on model split, parallelism, and what you're doing in networking. We saw DeepSeek rewrite the networking stack to get benefits out of there. He speaks about overlapping this asynchronous or reduced that we mentioned before. But he highlighted that one of their goals is just a better memory capacity than the competition. And with that, your split gets better. And
you have to split less because you can fit it onto fewer chips.
I kind of interpreted that as they're looking at Pensando 400s today that was announced in December, Pensando 800, Pensando 1.6 terabyte, down the line, but also you have what's the link? UA Link. Interesting enough, Broadcom left the UA Link consortium. I think we may have mentioned that in a previous episode.
Yeah, so we did.
If I got a chance to ask another question, that's what I would have asked. What's your opinion on Broadcom leaving the UA Link? And but Lisa did say as we go through MI 400, so the 26 chip, you'll see larger pod level solutions. So AI as a rack, like NVL, rather than AI as a box, like an 8 GPU box. So, and then, we had Ryan Shrout asking about commoditization of compute. Are we seeing customers, change their outlook based on these new models? And Lisa just turned around and said, there's a lot of data centers out there that can't use the latest and greatest. So everything needs to be optimized, not just the high-end stuff. The AMD's AMD has done very well on inference. We're expanding to medium scale training and demonstrating on large clusters, tens of thousands of GPUs, that they're reliable and performant. Our ambition is that we see our AI chip business as a tens of billions of dollars a year business. So at least 2x than what we have today, maybe 10x in the future. Basically doing what we did with Epic. Each new generation, you get customer confidence and experience and workload broadening. And perhaps the other announcement of the day came with the last question from Pat Moorehead. Semi-custom was mentioned in all of this. And he said, can you expand what you mean in semi-custom? And Lisa said, we have multiple ASICs and semi-custom designs outside of console in development, including in data center.
Interesting.
So custom. I'm not sure whether they count MI300C, the all CPU version of MI300X.
Semi-custom?
Because that's only for one.
Semi-custom.
Because it's only for one customer. But she went on to say, the way it works, customers who work our IP what they want to work with their IP environment. So chiplets, CPUs, GPUs, plus whatever the customer brings to the table. We will continue to talk more about our ASIC strategy, but our goal is to use the entire toolbox, and all of our IP is available for customization to our largest customers. You write a big enough check, AMD will design an ASIC the way you want it. So, Broadcom.
Wait, hold on. Does that include?
Yes.
Okay. Does that include?
Yes.
Interesting.
She said all our IP. Again, you need a big checkbook. So
yeah, you would have to have like a Microsoft or a Sony size check, but
well, this is the thing, right? I've done the calculation before of how many wafers Sony and Microsoft have needed in the past, and at times, it can be a couple of million a year. So the one thing AMD has to be able to do to clarify this is, can they secure volume at TSMC, especially if it's something that requires advanced packaging and everything else. So, and yeah, that was the Q&A with Lisa. I spent 40 minutes going over a Q&A. At this point, I will announce that there is a plan to do an after podcast chat in the Tech Potato Discord.
Oh.
If you want to join and you're not a member of the Discord, head on over to the Patreon, and if you put $1 in the tip jar and your Patreon and your Discord accounts are synced, you should get access to the server, and we'll see you in there. Just to have a post-show chat about whatever and whenever and how it goes. Links should be all in the description, or just search iancutress.com, I guess. But yeah, that's part one. I really liked speaking with Lisa because she's open, she's honest, she understands complex questions. So as much as I try and get something past her, she's a smart cookie. Just making sure George hasn't paused his.
Oh no! I'm just reading chat. Yeah.
So, yeah, no, it's good. I think we've got a few Q&As. Rain Z asks, on AMD with AI, is there a reason why they didn't work with tinygrad more, or why they dropped ZLUDA?
So on the tinygrad front, if you look at their code, it's all AMD code. Also, it looks like they're actually breaking potential license, the MIT license, in reusing GPL2 headers, which is, you can't do that with MIT license.
Yeah. Is that why George Hotz got suddenly very quiet about AMD?
Yeah, let me put it to you this way. If AMD didn't give explicit confirmation of them being allowed to do what they're doing, it's possible that AMD could go after them.
Whether they will or not is...
Yeah, whether they will or not is a completely different issue. But could they? It seems like potentially, because they are breaking license agreements if they don't have a license agreement from AMD themselves to reuse headers.
Yeah. And on,
sorry, I just have to plug in my laptop because it's
you're running out of power already.
Well, no, it's because I'm having to power my camera, the mic, also, yeah.
All the
uses quite a bit of power.
All the stuff that was powered by your desktop, you need to find.
Yeah, I'm now having to drive the my laptop.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And on terms of ZLUDA, isn't there like a licensing issue with NVIDIA?
I don't know if ZLUDA has a licensing issue or not. So I will claim if I know or not.
Because and things like HIP and stuff and what have you. Taco Cat, nice palindromic name, asks, not sure if this question is relevant right now, but what are each of your thoughts on AMD being coy with RDNA 4 details? They're just waiting to do a tech day. They want to brief everybody.
I expect that email soon, considering Lisa said early March.
Yeah. at this point, I don't think it'll be a tech day in person. And even if we were told you we're going to a tech day, or even if we were told that there's a tech day, we probably
couldn't tell
can't tell you
you.
about it. No, just because, you know, under embargo. Red Flames asks, ROCM only works on 3 GPUs, none of which you can buy, or has it improved since I looked last? have you got one? So which GPUs does ROCM work on?
So, oh boy. Okay. If you're talking about Linux, the list is pretty narrow. But if you're talking about Windows, for whatever reason, Windows is actually better supported. And it's from basically it's N21, which is top-end Navi RDNA 2. So that's 6800 XT, 6900 XT, as well as all of RDNA 3 dedicated DGPUs are supported. But on Linux, it's actually fairly thin in that really only N31 or the XT or the 7900 XTX and 7900 XT and the GRE are supported.
Yeah.
Why that split happens, I don't know. It seems like it would be fairly easy to get RDNA 2 working on Linux as well as the rest of RDNA 3, but
yeah. So I'm looking at. I literally just put in GPUs that ROCM works on, and the documentation says 79 XTX, 7900 XT, 7900 GRE, but you can also go Radeon Pro.
Radeon Pro, I think, supports W6800, which is N21. So I wonder why they're not formally supporting it, because it looks like the support should be there.
Not one of these, then.
Which one is that? I can't read that.
7700.
7700. I would have to go check the ROCM.
Yeah, it doesn't say it is.
The ROCM.
Yeah, no. This is the one they sampled me, and it's still sealed.
Yeah. So to answer a couple questions that just came in, Yak Duck asks thoughts on AMD GPU converging. AMD GPU architecture of converging architecture, then diverging, and now converging again with UDNA. So we don't know what UDNA is. That could just be an ISA conversion. So that could be, for example, that could just be going. So Vega, AMD Vega was GFX 9. CDNA is still GFX 9, whereas RDNA 3 is on GFX 11. We may see a recombining of the ISIS to GFX 12 or GFX 13. We don't know.
Yeah. If MI325X is CDNA, we know that 350 is CDNA. 400 is CDNA next.
Well, honestly, UDNA, CDNA, RDNA, it's all just marketing terms, right?
Yeah.
That's like client Blackwell versus server Blackwell. The SM levels are different. Data center Blackwell is SM10 versus or SM100 versus SM120 for client Blackwell. Different, right? So
we just got a super chat in. Thank you from Askar Amadov for his 10 Canadian. Thank you. Hi, Poutine. Do you think the market is done with hoping that AMD is gaining any real traction in the AI accelerator market? Looks like hyperscalers are going custom ASICs instead. You should have been here a few minutes ago when I answered that question. But the hyperscalers are going to need all sorts of silicon. Not only GPU, not only their own ASICs, but also GPUs. GPUs are more flexible. So something like DeepSeek, for example, came out. Everybody wanted to run it on GPUs. Nobody wanted to run it on ASICs, or it was harder to get running on ASICs. That's the whole point of it being an ASIC. It's less flexible. So if you want to do very fast iteration, you need a full software stack for your ASIC. And especially if you've got a new model in, maybe things have to change for that. Lisa still believes that the market, in 28 will still be mostly GPU, because hyperscalers are while a big part of the market, they're not the market, right? Elon isn't building an ASIC for the majority of his Grok business. He has an ASIC for his Tesla business and Dojo, and even where exactly that is right now, who knows? But that's like a wave scale engine type thing. In terms of AMD gaining any real traction, I think we'll get into this in the financials in a second. But I did see a report saying that actually AMD lost market share in data center GPU last year. And again, we kind of covered this in the pre-show, this whole 6 million versus maybe 250,000, 400,000. NVIDIA is just outselling 20 to 1 in certain cases. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what's going on. Another couple of questions about this topic. James Pryor asks, are there any non-AI PC options to upgrade to now? Yes. You have the N100, if that's an upgrade. I upgraded my father from 2nd gen Core i3 to N100, and it's infinitely faster. Yeah, so from a 12 generations prior to something that came out 3 years ago. Still 4 threads, 2 cores, 4 threads to 4 core, 4 thread, and it's Sandy Bridge level performance, easy. So yeah, no, is it the 11th gen or the 12th gen? Mobile SKUs don't have NPUs, so there is that. Obviously, Meteor Lake only had a 10 TOPS NPU, 13 TOPS NPU, so that's not CoPilot Plus. And it actually no, Intel's new generation CPUs only have like 13 TOPS NPU, but they have like a 99 TOPS GPU or something.
So
the question is how much.
Basically, if it's not Lunar Lake, I think it's technically not CoPilot Plus. Don't quote me on that though.
It depends what you define as an AI PC versus a CoPilot Plus PC. Intel is including everything that's like 10 TOPS as an AI PC, but also you can run the AI on the GPU, and so therefore it's an AI PC. So there's that. And a question from Fixed Function: how adaptable are ASICs for the new transform models when we start evolving those? A lot of people are hesitant to support ASICs because they believe they'll age out and be unusable before GPUs. Yeah, we kind of answered this already, but I think if you expand the scope to all the AI hardware startups, while we don't call those chips GPUs, they're designed to act like GPUs. They just don't do graphics. They're meant to be infinitely flexible, like a GPU. It's a general programmable ASIC. ASIC is also a bit of a misnomer as well, because application specific integrated circuit is meant to be, this circuit just does one thing. Yeah. With whatever your data you throw at it. But any hardware out there, whether it's GPU or hyperscaler ASIC, it can do transformers, it can do all reduces, it can do custom operators, right? There's a mixture of functions it can do, and there are ways around it. So, iScopes asks, hey, Doc Potato, looking for your opinion. Do you see any alternative to silicon becoming good enough of an alternative, such as graphene? Forgot exact name, but thoughts. There is a short on my channel about a company called Destination 2D that is looking at graphene interconnects. Though, because really what a CPU is these days is, or a chip is, you silicon, then you put in copper wires, and then you have a doped transistor with with a gate material. The amount of silicon that's actually used for moving electrons around is quite small. So when you say, let's have a new material other than silicon, what you're actually asking for is there a new carrier material? And realistically, no. Silicon's had 50 plus years, 70 plus years of research. So there's that. And then Tristan asks, is the x86 business holding AMD back? Well, if they split out the x86 side and merged it with Intel, no, they wouldn't be allowed. Also, the x86 business. Also, AMD wants a full stack of IP because they have a variety of products that rely on it. Also, a lot of the trust they're getting on their AI hardware comes from trust built through their EPIC business. Right. So, and Scopes does ask what happened to the Gen Z interconnect. I think they, I mean, that was mothballed with Tide Pods, I think. No, it
got merged in with CXL, if I remember correctly.
CXL or C6?
CXL, because I think CCIX also was merged into CXL.
Yeah, bunch of stuff. So.
Let me go double check that.
Yeah. There's also other stuff such as OpenCAPI memory interface that got merged into CXL. But I think Gen Z went C6. Let's present a tab. Can you see it?
Yes. Yeah.
No, I mean, can you?
So,
did you find?
Oh, can I read it? I've read it, but I couldn't read it this tiny window that I was in.
So no. What you were looking for is
no.
Gen C and C.
I couldn't find it.
And Durham provides us. Wow, that's not.
What is that currency?
Ian, you asked Lisa about their instinct, so let me ask you, what do you think AMD should change or improve in the AI solutions? I think they're missing something, and that is the half-height AI data center inference card. Basically, the MI210, but on the MI300 series. That's what they're missing.
Yeah.
They're missing a high volume cut down. The whole point of doing chiplets and having 4 compute chiplets was that at some point you only need half of that, and then that becomes a product, or a quarter of that, and that becomes a product. That's the way it was designed, so it can be cut up into a half or a quarter, and that never came to market. We never really heard about it. So it's
I would agree.
That's Israeli shekels.
Okay. I was like, is that Israeli? Because I was like, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So the one thing we love AMD to do is have the end-to-end stack of support. So if I write code on a $100 GPU, like I can with NVIDIA, it will run on the biggest data center GPU without recompilation. Okay, some of the optimization metrics will be way off, but it will still run. And even the stuff that I wrote 15 years ago will still run on Blackwell, which is amazing amount of forward compatibility, matched only by x86 at this point, I guess. AMD doesn't have that, which means it's a struggle for developers to get excited about AMD when they can't get easy access to the hardware and they can't easily scale it up.
It's almost as if this is what I've been talking about for years with you.
Yes, it is. Excuse me. The other side is that there has been some criticism for this NVLink competitor UA-Link, in the sense that when you have too many people around the table, you can't move as fast. So So it will allow NVIDIA to remain agile, whereas the consortium may move slower. And as a result, the gap will just widen for GPU to GPU interconnects, which may all just not matter when we move to optical. So we'll see. iScopes confirms Gen Z was absorbed by CXL.
Okay.
But Dorian, I hope that answers your question. Is there anything else you think they should change aside from just more people working on it?
Yeah. So if you were to I think I've sort of already covered it, and that is ROCM from your APUs all the way up,
Yep.
but also networking, which again we've touched on.
Yep. I think the other thing is the marketing. They're a bit too slow to highlight massive wins. Like OpenAI says we're 10% cheaper than NVIDIA on inference. So that's why OpenAI just deployed 100,000 in a data center. If I was AMD, I would, and I'm one of AMD's analysts, and so they asked me about this, and I'm like, you should be shouting this from the rooftops. This is a pretty big win, right? 10% is a lot of pennies at the end of the day if you've got a big workload. So this is why AMD now is in IBM Cloud and all sorts of other things.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, I agree. I think my two big things, and actually what you pointed out was great. Having a PCIe card that is compatible with the big OEM sockets. If you've never seen an OEM like an MI300, MI325, it's basically a board with a massive heat sink on top, and it weighs like 6 pounds. But yeah, you need a much more simple AI card essentially that has similar capabilities to your big OEM. Oh, what does Ian have here?
So this isn't OEM. This is technically SXM2. You know, the NVIDIA type variant. This is a Pascal 100 GPU I picked up from eBay for $50-$60.
Was this the one that I delivered to you last year at CES?
Yes.
Yeah, but
it's it's because my camera's on fixed focus. You probably won't be able to see, but it's got all the little tiny connectors in there.
Yeah. But basically, what that does is it slots down, and while that's great for a big server, it's arguably not, as easy as a PCIe card. You just slot it in. So yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. So
ooh, it's changed. No, because we were on that phone. Okay, yeah. So it's OAM is a slightly slightly different XY, different pin out, but similar concept. And that went in this synthetic bag, I think. I've got too many things. No, it went in this one. Now, here we go. So yeah, let's move on to the financials, and because we've covered a bunch of stuff, we can go through AMD fairly quickly here. No, you don't need to 3D print me any as chip organizers because they're all different sizes. And unless you really want a chip organizer for the Radeon HD 6750, and underneath of which is a GT 110, and then I have a Snapdragon X Elite.
I have that somewhere. I have to go.
And then obviously Habana. Did I show that off last time? We have the Xeon Phi 5110P.
Ian just pulling things off shelves.
Oh yeah, making sure they don't fall because they're too dense. This is the grid. This is the NVIDIA Grid K1.
That's such a funny card. If I remember correctly, it's what, 4 Keplers on like 4 GK1. Like
you can see the
or
back.
something.
You can see the back. It's got 4 of them, and then obviously B580. And now all this stuff won't fit in. And I have a R9, RX 465. No, R9 285. I have a really rare one for some reason up here. Too much stuff. Actually, where is it? Yeah, that's the super rare Xeon Phi. I've shown off the Itanium before. This is the AMD Ferrari Opteron. Okay, I'll stop now. This is just boasting. Let's go on to AMD's financials. This was primarily written up by Ryan, and I did some cleanup and the transcribe the analyst Q&A. This you can go over and see at more-more.com. The Q&A is under the paywall, but you can go to my Twitter and it's all there as well, just not cleaned up. And this is the big graph. This is okay, that works. This is their revenue every quarter in millions. So in Q4, they $7.6 billion of revenue, highest ever. You may also see here at the top, I've got the launches of Zen 5, and Zen 4 and Zen 3 and all the RDNA. That's desktop launches, not enterprise launches. And one of their previous highs was this 6550. The 6550 here. That's the height of the pandemic. But yeah, now we finally have data center. There's a lot of money there. Margin is up. Gross margin is up. Highlights: record overall quarterly revenue, record data center, record client. And the big news out of this is that the MI350X, so their next generation Instinct GPU, will be, instead of it being in the second half of 25, it will be in mid-25. So a 3-month pull-in, which means it's ready earlier. Or at least it will be shipping for revenue earlier, whether you can actually get one or not. Baseline up 24% revenue year on year. For those of you who don't know, who aren't familiar with the financial comparisons, they typically compare the quarter of one year to the quarter of the previous year, because some things are seasonal. Right, so Q1, so the quarter we're in right now, is typically a low point because everybody's spent out from Christmas and we have Chinese New Year. So Q4 is typically up in consumer land and Q1 is typically down. It's that sort of thing. There's also things like what's happening geopolitically that get involved. So Q1 is going to be fun. Let's put it that way. We go through the numbers. Now, this is the per group. So AMD has 4 business units: data center, client, gaming, and embedded. And one thing to highlight here is that the Q4 data center revenue, $3.8 billion, is $9 million more than all of their Q2 21 revenue. So in the space of 3.5 years, one business unit accounts for more revenue than the whole company did in a quarter 3.5 years ago, which is insane.
So those bar graphs aren't relative then to each other.
Sorry?
The bar graphs aren't relative to each other. So
no, it's $9 million higher.
That doesn't look $9 million higher on the graph.
Well, that's because this is 3,859 units high. Trust me, if you drew a line, it'd be higher.
Okay. It just doesn't look higher in the graph. I don't know why, but
also here, gaming clients 2.3 billion, and gaming is almost at its lowest ever.
Yeah,
and I'll get into the reason why. But data center is what we're talking about: Instinct and Epic, basically.
Yeah, and embedded, if you guys are wondering, that's largely Xilinx, and that market is still recovering from the glut that happened in 21, 22.
It's embedded market take. Well, we'll get there. So in client, essentially up 58% year on year, and a record high going back to numbers as Q2 22. AMD is citing strong demand for both Ryzen 9000 and Ryzen AI 300. It was mentioned that's the most popular chip they have in their portfolio, which is the Ryzen. George,
you want me to guess which one?
Yeah.
Out of all okay. Oh, I'm either gonna say the 9800X3D or the 9950.
It's the 9800X3D.
Okay.
And just to answer Cybot's question, wherever my mouse is, does it count towards gaming or client? It counts towards client. Client. So this is all the desktop CPUs and all the notebook CPUs, and all the APUs fall into here. They said that they had trouble keeping the 9800X3D in stock in Q4. Demand was so high, so they were still shipping in January this year, meeting the demand for Christmas.
Yes,
it was.
So I know somebody who ordered one in November and only just got it like a day or two ago. So yeah.
I think I saw like one of those Mind Factory graphs, and out of all AMD CPUs sold,
like 87%.
Yeah,
something insane.
It was either December or January. So very, very, and it turns out if you have the right product for the right market, The question about Threadripper, I believe because it's prosumer, it still counts as client. But however, Threadripper is a nth of a business right now.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one, but it is a very small sliver.
Yeah. But yeah, they went from $55 million of operating income to 446. So a nice 8x there in terms of, so a lot of these businesses are what we call fixed cost businesses, and the way to get more operating income is you have to have volume. So driven by strong demand, and they were keen to point out everything that they launched at CES, which we'll see some revenue in Q1. And of course, the one we all want, Strix Halo.
Yes, that reminds me. My Asus contact, if you're listening, I'm going to email you after this about that.
Anson, so you know Carrie the fox?
Yes.
He has two now.
I'm like, yeah, exactly. Give them to me.
Yeah. So one thing to point out when we speak about client and enterprise is that when we talk about semi-custom designs, like the Ryzen Z2 or the Z1 Extreme for handhelds, they fall under client, right? Or semi-custom data center chips fall under data center. The consoles, because they're semi-custom gaming chips, fall under gaming.
They fall under gaming.
So same with the Radeon GPUs. So revenue was down a lot year over year, up quarter to quarter, but down year on year. And I have this very disappointing graph, just showing you how much money AMD is making on GPUs and consoles these days. Now, they did explain that because of the pandemic, Microsoft and Sony were oversupplied on consoles. When you have too much inventory, you then buy less from your supplier in order to realign the numbers. The thing is, to your supplier, it's a double negative, because not only are you no longer buying more than normal, you're buying less than normal. So instead of buying 10, you're now buying 1, when realistically your average used to be 5.
It's 5. Yeah.
So, you lose 90% revenue when in reality your customer is only twice as overstocked.
Mm-hmm.
And what Lisa said is that when this happens, it's called inventory digestion, as in you're waiting for your client to consume the CPUs. They said that Microsoft and Sony have now finished eating those CPUs.
So they're going to start buying more.
But we're also in the 6th year of the console cycle.
Which means that
they're
going to be ramping down.
Anyway.
Well, Sony probably won't be, at least not for the PS4 Pro. So those will still be ramping up. But for Microsoft and for the base PS5, I could see sort of a ramp down.
So I got to speak to one of AMD's execs about these numbers. And I said, is there anything planned end of the year for GTA 6 launch? And he said, we're a bit too far away to know. To which then I got a ping from Ryan saying, you fool, it's not going to be launched this year. How dare you? Technically, it's due out in November in Q4. It may be pushed to Q5.
Yeah, that's completely unsurprising.
Yeah, so no from me. I asked if anything is planned ahead of GTA 6 release, because that's a big console seller, right?
Mm-hmm.
Expected in Q4, or if we're unlucky, Q5. Normally, a GTA release drives console sales, however, no additional insight was provided. The other thing was, obviously, the RX 7000 series is now old.
Yeah.
And we're expecting, we're going to get 9070 coming out soon. And then we have Xilinx and Embedded, and as George said, they're going through some inventory digestion just because it's a market with a substantial delay. The products you design as, from the Xilinx perspective, the revenue return is more like 5 years down the line. So they're long life cycle products. And as a result, they also have digestion. They launched a new card for high-end frequency trading in the Alveo line in the last couple of quarters. They also announced their Versal Gen 2, which is the first product to support both CXL 3.1 and PCIe Gen 6. So that's fun. And then, their outlook is down for Q1 versus the current quarter. Again, just because Q1 is...
I was going to say, is that
down.
seasonal? Is that seasonal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much all seasonal. The one thing, if you have access to this, you'll see this. The one thing that came out though is some of the financial analysts were doing the numbers, and it feels like AMD's sales of Instinct will actually decrease during the first half. And I mentioned this earlier, but then ramp up in the second half. So if you're wondering why AMD's stock price is down, that's probably it. I'm not sure where they're at now. AMD's down
sort of
0.5% today.
My question is, when does revenue for 350 hit? Because I know that they said that they're shipping to first customers already, like they're shipping QS essentially.
Yeah, and they have pulled it in 3 months.
Yeah.
There may be a small bit of revenue in Q2, but it'll mostly be, and then you'll get some in Q3. It all depends whether the customer, accepts delivery, so then you can realize that revenue.
Yeah.
We covered this last week with ASML. Even though ASML shipped the big EUV machines last 12 months ago to Intel, they could only realize the revenue this year at the end of the year because that's when Intel accepted delivery.
Yep.
Imagine installing it in and they're going, nah, you can send it back.
Yeah, that would be rough.
So let's pivot to the Intel financials.
Oh boy. I'm going to have a bit of a rant here.
So obviously we had Pat Gelsinger out at the end of last quarter. So now we have MJ and David Zisner. Both two people I actually really like to talk to. MJ is really cool and Dave's really honest. I've said it multiple times on the channel. I'm not saying that because they're a client of mine. I speak with so many people in this industry, and that's just the feeling I get from these two. And we've got some more Intel stuff to speak about because the thumbnail said new Intel CEO, so we've got to speak about that later. But yeah, this was this is a week ago now, so try and remember all this. The big thing for them is that they were able to, from the CHIPS Act, they have now accepted $2.2 billion. Even though they've formally signed that they will accept the whole lot, $2.2 billion is in the accounts.
Okay.
So in terms of numbers, revenue is down. Gross margins are up, but revenue is down due to a mixture of things. And this quarter's revenue is this last blue bar. The green is the
next quarter.
Yeah, it's next quarter, and you can see it's substantially down. Again, seasonal. Q1 is seasonal, so so there was some news out of this for people who didn't see. Intel confirms that there is a processor after Panther Lake. So for those of you unaware, right now we are on Arrow Lake. Lunar Lake is a dev project. There is going to be no successor to Lunar Lake, but we have Arrow Lake. That's now top to bottom Intel's CPU of choice. Then we will have Panther Lake coming out second half of this year into Q1 next year, and then Nova Lake is the new product coming out in 2026. The second bit of news is that Clearwater Forest. This is the E-core based server CPU that's coming next. Originally, Intel kind of said that the ramp would happen in the second half of this year. By ramp, we mean going from 100 chips to 100,000. They've now formalized and said that the availability for that product will be in 26, which there's no real change there because the customers would have already known this. But some people have said this is a 6-month delay. I'd argue it could be a 2-day delay, December 31st to January 1st, realistically. So there is that. And then the final big thing, and this is the one I actually made a video for on the day, if you've not seen it on the channel. Intel has a product, an AI hardware product line called Gaudi from Habana, and now I've messed up which order these are in. So Habana, one of these things. And the idea was that it was going to go Gaudi 1, Gaudi 2, Gaudi 3, Falcon Shores, Jaguar Shores. Falcon Shores is being removed from the roadmap and is now being relegated to test chip status, as in we're going to work out all the kinks in Falcon, and then we're actually going to productize Jaguar. So they're still making it, but it's going to be for internal use and for design iteration, which means there will be another 2 years without an update of Intel's AI chip.
So
Intel's in a dichotomy right now. The market is saying you need better AI hardware, and so Intel have responded by saying, okay, we're going to give you what you want, but it's going to be in another 2 years minimum.
So
it also joins the list of cancelled Intel enterprise products.
So, okay. Earlier, we were talking about AMD strategy and how people saying, here's the thing about MI. You can't say that they're not selling chips. They are selling chips one way or another.
$5 billion worth.
Yeah, they're selling chips. Great, awesome. Intel isn't even doing that at this point.
They sold under $500 million worth last year.
Peanuts.
Of Gaudi. Mostly Gaudi 2, because technically Gaudi 3 only came out during Q4. But
yes, but like you and I, so in a previous tech routine, we asked the question: should Intel pull out of the DCAI market? And I don't mean Intel's division called DCAI. I mean the data center AI market. So the market for Gaudi, the market for MI, the market for NVIDIA GPUs.
Yep.
And I said, wait for Falcon Shores. We need to see what Falcon Shores is capable of.
Yep.
With this announcement, this might be a hot take. Intel should just divest their losses at this point.
Yeah, I mean,
this is not
that was
2014. This is Intel of 2024. They don't have money to just be spending on basically spending good money on bad, because they've put how much. I think Patrick from Server the Home actually did an analysis on his Substack about how much money Intel has effectively lost in the AI space.
Yeah.
And it's something in, I think, the 10, 12 billion range.
It's well, they paid $2 billion for Habana. That's not including how much they spent on Movidius and on Nirvana. So one of Intel's arguments is they missed the mobile phone boat, so they have to be here by hook or by crook. The other thing is the software they make in data center AI is meant to scale, right? So that's why they have one API, right? Essentially a singular base and then compiled to target. The reason for canceling Falcon Shores, as I said in my video, is that the AI market is fast changing, and customers needed or basically turned around and said, we need something better than Falcon. We need something that's more designed for rack scale rather than chip scale. And they felt that Jaguar would be a better alignment than Falcon, and that's why Falcon's being cancelled. But again,
did they give any timeline for Jaguar?
Well, we expect it was going to be anywhere from 12 to 24 months after Falcon.
Okay.
So the idea being that it was Jaguar was meant to be a chiplet system like AMD, but you could either do x86, Xe cores, AI cores, or HBM, and like in a mix and match scenario. They never really told us any proper details of what Falcon Shores is going to be, just that it's going to be mix and match chiplets. But in terms of the financials, let's go. Let's go to the graph. And Intel did change some of the reporting this quarter. So normally we had clients, we had data center, we had network and edge, then we had Mobileye, Altera, Foundry, and then, other. But because Altera is now in the process of doing a partial IPO, divestment, Mobileye is already IPO'd and partial divestment. They have moved both of those to other.
Okay.
Edge computing is moving to CCG, and network computing is moving to DCAI. So eventually NEX will disappear.
Okay.
NEX, it sounds like NEX will go eventually as well. So you have CCG, so client, data center, foundry, and other. So the first two being what Intel calls Intel products. But as you'll note, client actually went up. DCAI went up a little bit. And then these other numbers are a bit harder to discern because of the changing amount. So foundry year on year actually went down because we're comparing 5.2 to 4.5. However, this is because Intel is going through so much of a change in foundry. They obviously had this big loss last quarter. They're trying to realign stuff so as they scale up 18A, and a lot of this is 18A dev cost. And this is revenue they've acquired from products as well, from their own product teams. They're still going to be negative until I think they said 27, and then margin positive by the end of the decade. So yeah, there's still.
So basically,
and
what you're saying is there's no hope in spinning off Foundry until the end of the decade.
Unless somebody's willing to take on the debt. But as
yeah,
you said before,
but it's a lot of debt. Like realistically, there aren't many that could.
So GlobalFoundries, you remember when they spun off and they got essentially invested by Mubadala.
Yeah.
When they stopped doing 7 nanometer was because they were losing $1 billion a quarter. I think they went like 200, 300, 500, $1 billion. And then it's like, right, no, we're not doing EUV anymore. And then they shot back up, right? So this is multiple times worse than that. But this is because Intel spent so long only building chips for itself, they were able to hide the inefficiencies of Foundry. Now, don't get me wrong, those inefficiencies did help products get better. Things like, as George was saying earlier, hot shots. Normally, a Foundry has thousands and thousands of wafers ongoing at once, and you automate it so your machines are 100% utilized. But that may mean the wafer that's just had the spin coating will have to wait a week until the next machine is ready because of how the chain is. What a hotshot does is when a batch of wafers is finished in one machine, it gets put to the top of the queue for the next machine. So there's no waiting time in between. So instead of it spending either 3 to 6 months to go through the fab, it may only take a week and a half. The problem is you suddenly reduce the efficiency of your tools, and that costs money.
Yeah.
And also things get held up in the pipeline that you then have to even out. So Intel was doing a lot of that back in the day, a lot of R&D, things like doing 7 spins on Sapphire Rapids costs money.
More than 7 spins as far as I know, but yeah.
It depends whether you, whether they're base layer or top layer respins and what have you. So, but yeah, Intel's leadership is focusing on getting Intel Foundry to break even by the end of 27. So that's at least revenue neutral. So this operating income, this bottom blue bar, becomes 0. And then making the margin and revenue go up to be corporate average by the end of the decade. The other reason why they can't sell Foundry is because of their nodes can only be used by themselves, or at least the 14, 10, 7. And we've gone over this on the channel before, so I won't reiterate it. So 18A is going to be in high volume production in Intel Fab 52 in Arizona. But the first production runs, as always, will be in Oregon, because all their new nodes will be in Oregon. But they're already installing tools in Arizona to start ramp of 18A at the second half of this year, with Panther Lake for client and Clearwater Forest for servers. There's an additional note for me here, and it's the video I've been doing for 3 weeks. Intel have shown me some yield numbers, or at least their defect rates. It's following standard industry expectation this far out from ramp. The yield curves are following standard industry trends as we get closer to high volume manufacturing. I'm going to stretch that out into a 15-minute video, so I hope you're ready to watch. And then this is the Foundry being awarded the money, as I mentioned earlier, from the CHIPS Act, at least 2.2 out of the 7.8 billion. Then we have data center AI. So while up sequential, was down year on year, they're only making $200 million. All of Xeon only made $200 million of operating income. It's a bit sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
Nvidia's number is 30 billion.
Yeah.
They've got 0.2, which leads to this like low margin. This is because they're sort of still in the middle of their release of Granite Rapids and Sierra Forest. The P and the E, 6900, 6700.
Speaking of Granite Rapids, what happened to SP, or the sort of more mainstream version of Granite Rapids? We haven't heard anything about it.
I've not heard much from DCAI recently, so
okay.
Except for about Falcon And this is my video. I did 3 thumbnails for this video, and this one was the one that was most watched. So that's fun. And just to Suna Fredrickson asks, Pat Gelsinger mentioned in an interview, I bet the company on 18A. Is this still the case? Yeah. If 18A fails, then the company looks very differently. It won't fail. Looks good. In terms of client revenue, client is up sequentially, even with all the high-end consumer issues surrounding the latest generation hardware and all the updates. They still sold $8 billion and made $3.1 billion. So margin of 38%, which is pretty good considering the rest of the business. And Arrow Lake is also particularly ramping. The problem here is that this number is full of Arrow Lake and Lunar Lake, which use TSMC tiles. TSMC tiles are more expensive. So there's a ramp going on. And as this stuff moves to Panther, it will look a lot better. So one of the reasons why Intel was up after earnings is because of this expectation of improvement. One of the points mentioned here is that some Asian customers bought extra chips in Q4 than they needed because of potential Q1 political macro.
Yeah.
No other company I've spoken to has said they saw a difference, but Intel said there was. And here we have the networking business, which is regaining share and networking edge. So the deck for this quarter, said edge is moving to CCG, networking is moving to DCAI. That hasn't been finalized yet. All other revenue is relatively flat, an increase in margin. Part of this is because Altera is still going through the inventory digestion, same as Xilinx. Though it seems like it's affecting Xilinx more than it is affecting Altera more than it is Xilinx. Part of this is also Mobileye had additional leverage in their business, better leverage of its portfolio. They're also trying to divest more from China, so they're less China involved. And as we've seen before, the revenue is a weak Q1. They're coming off a stronger than expected Q4. And Q1 is seasonal. But also they're in the middle of all their product cycles. Luna, Arrow, Granites are all shipping and continuing to ramp. And anything Intel comes out with is more of a second half of the year. Easy on all fronts. And that's pretty much it. And then again, there's more financial Q&A if you want to go down there. So let's talk about this news. They've taken the photo out. Let's move to this news. Do we have Intel's next CEO? So one of the questions has been, since Pat Gelsinger left/pushed, who will take over? Who in the US has the right amount of semiconductor experience to take over a company the size of Intel with over 100,000 employees, high-end manufacturing, and a massive products business? And the products business is bigger than the foundry business. And also, if preferable, America. Or somebody in line with American interests who's prepared to work with an administration regardless of their personal beliefs. One of the reasons I think Pat may have left is because his personal beliefs don't align with the Trump government. And so we all threw a bunch of names out.
Let's just say he's not the only one, but yeah.
Yeah, we threw a bunch of names out. And I'm not sure if this guy really appeared on my radar much. But because of a series
I know I didn't. Maybe he should have been considered by us, but yeah, he didn't really come out as a stand-up potential because he was already at GloFo. So
yeah, and I say you rarely think of a competitor becoming the CEO of a competing company. So you don't expect Lisa to suddenly be the CEO. You don't expect Jensen to suddenly be the CEO.
Despite what the thumbnail may imply, yes.
Yeah, it's like you rarely see a sports person be traded directly to their biggest rival, especially if they're an elite superstar multi-year contract. Sometimes it happens. So this news is it comes in several parts. The first part is this global. Let's see if we can find the picture in the news. Yeah,
that one.
Yeah.
They just removed it from the. Okay.
Yeah, which is annoying. Let's see if we can open this image. Share this tab instead. Yeah. So GlobalFoundries, which is the US's second biggest fab, has announced a change in leadership. Now, what we have here is a bunch of people: Tim Breen, Ahmed Yahya, Dr. Thomas Caulfield, Niels. I can't pronounce that. Sorry. This guy has been the CEO for 7 years now. I met him before he was CEO. I interviewed him in mid-23 at their tech event. He was essentially there during their investors' decision to pull out from EUV. And over time, he has built GlobalFoundries into a profitable business with research and like $1 billion of free cash now as well. So they have 3 main sites. It's upstate New York, Malta, Singapore, and then Dresden. They're the 3 main sites, and they deal in the corporate marketing term is essential nodes. The rest of the world calls them legacy nodes. So we're talking 14, 16, 32, 45, 60, 90, 135. But the thing is, if you need a radio frequency transmitter or a high voltage or a radiation hardened, or if you need analog design, a bunch of this stuff you can't do on the leading edge, or it's financially too prohibitive.
Yeah.
Either the research there or it costs too much. And so their whole idea was, let's bring new features to new nodes, and let's also help drive down the cost. And they've been working on this, again, since Tom's been in place and since all these people have been in place. So their news as of yesterday. This is a video I would have made if I didn't have ARM and Qualcomm's financials last night. Is that the guy who's the CEO, Tom Caulfield, he's the short one there, he's about my height, is stepping down as CEO, but taking over as executive chairman of the board. The new CEO is the guy on the left, Tim Breen, and then the guy on the right, Niels, I think, is taking over from the guy on the left, and also been appointed president. So the tallest guy, he's stepping down from the board. That's why he's there. And the Tom Caulfield, again, third from the left, is taking over his position. So basically, just an internal leadership change.
Yeah. So
why would somebody of that age leave a position where he's doing really well?
Well, no, that's not what I was going to ask. What I was going to ask is, could he still serve as chairman of the board?
Hang on. We'll get there. That's part of the.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So part 2 in this, and this is from Trading Tony at our Intel stock for a reason. On February 4th, there was a unusual aftermarket purchase of about $170 million worth of Intel stock. And I think there's an image here. Share this tab. So this is showing how many shares and at what price and the total value of the stock. And it's this line here. that seemed a bit odd. 8 million shares, which is sizable for the day. I think it was 3 times the day, 3 times for the day on it. And you need something like a Bloomberg terminal to see this. If I share this tab and I share this picture, this is the volume. And the volume on this day is up here. So it's massive. It's a massive spike in individual volume. So the thing is, and some of you may have read ahead here, this sum is incredibly close to the compensation Pat Gelsinger was offered in 21.
Interesting.
Incredibly close. So for that to happen on the 4th, and then Tom Caulfield of GlobalFoundries to announce his, not stating his retirement, but change of role at GlobalFoundries on the next day, seems a little bit interesting. But okay, so now let's look at Tom's experience, right? He's been at GlobalFoundries, helped enable this IPO, managed the 7 nanometer transition because the investors didn't want to. So he's operated fabs. He's dealt with tens of thousands of customers. And he also spent time at IBM Microelectronics, showing that he understands manufacturing and product. He has a PhD in material science and engineering from Columbia, which isn't anything to be sniffed at. So he's had the mixture of operational, financial, technological experience and strong academics. So does this sound like somebody who could lead Intel?
Does it sound like it on paper? Yes.
Absolutely. Let's see if I can.
Will he lead Intel? I don't know, obviously. But yeah, I like the question that you sort of wanted me to ask later was, can he serve on the board of GlobalFoundries as well as be Intel CEO?
So technically, yes, if both boards vote for it.
Huh. Okay.
But, and there is a big but, would he want to?
Yeah.
So let's have a poll. I'll only run it for like a minute or so. But could Dr. Tom Caulfield be Intel's next CEO? And I say this because I have some more information that isn't presented here. But at least, does he fit the bill? Does he fit the bill? He's American.
Yes, he absolutely
He's been in
fits
charge
the bill.
of Foundry. He has some product experience, but perhaps not major. You could argue, well, didn't Pat have all that? And Pat came into the job and didn't have Foundry experience, right? He was always on the product side before, product and design. Tom doesn't have the same product and design, but he has, as in, why couldn't he be CEO of Foundry? Well, because they already have a CEO of Foundry, and he was only recently appointed, right? So, yeah, let's. So yeah, we're getting a few votes in. It's about 73% of people saying yes. So it's a 3 to 1. My stipulation is that Tom hasn't worked on the sort of scale that Intel is. So Intel has a massive budget. Like I say, they've just done $1 billion free cash flow. And if I look at GlobalFoundries revenue, if I spell GlobalFoundries wrong, I call it FlobalFoundries.
I would.
Their revenue per quarter, so they're about an $8 billion a year business. Intel's roughly a $50 billion, 50 to 60 billion. So it's an 8x increase in size in revenue.
Here's my counterpoint to that: the number of companies that are as big as Intel with a fab is not very high. Yes, it's 3, arguably 2. Because Samsung, TSMC, and Intel. Arguably, Samsung is a bit different, but
So, and then also on the product side, but then they have MJ for that. They have Michelle Johnson Hothouse, who can do product She could do product in her sleep, but she's also the one that cancelled Falcon Shores. So you've got this, and George, you either love her or hate her.
Yeah, it's
You see, the M in MJ stands for Marmite, clearly. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, it's 3-1. So I actually reached out to GlobalFoundries, who haven't emailed me in almost a year, or at least 6 months, from their last tech day in August. And I said, what's Tom going to be doing? And you know, I'm paraphrasing, but they basically said to me he's going to be assisting the new CEO in transition. All this stuff doesn't actually change until April 28th, so we've still got 3 months. And his role is going to be more focused on as executive chair, on government engagement, academic engagement, research engagement. Brackets, it's going to be a full-time job. And I said, you know, I'm paraphrasing what they said essentially, and I said, wouldn't it be good if you could say that publicly, or at least, you know, in a statement? And they said, yeah, we wish we could. You know, it's the way they outlined his job is that they expect him to be there. It sounds like long term. So don't get me wrong. If somebody offers me 170 million to go be the CEO of Intel, I'm taking that payday. Dang, yeah, I'm sure everybody is. But realistically, how many people have experience? And I kind of feel guilty for not considering Tom as significantly as before. I guess the only other thing is Tom's got a stage presence. He's not as people facing as Pat is. So I mean, he don't get me wrong, he still gets in front of people.
Well, you have to as a CEO.
You do, and there were waves made about acquisition of Intel over at Semi-Analysis, and that caused Semi-Accurate, and that caused the share price to spike. And there was a supposed meeting between a bunch of people in Florida before the World Economic Forum that may have been speaking about Intel. Apparently, some people are insane conspiracy about this. But yeah, so here's primer on Tom Caulfield. Let's share this tab. So CEO of GlobalFoundries since 2018, turning into a profitable business with about $1 billion in free cash flow annually. Experiencing contract manufacturing, foundry efficiency, and negotiating deals, technical and leadership skills, experience with CHIPS Act, and discussion with politics. I mean, he's based in New York. He's a big believer in importance of semiconductor foundries. Grew up in Brooklyn. Dad was a firefighter. Could get on very well with current admin. You know, so yeah, there's a little bit of stipulation. Who could this be a merger?
You're linked below, which is funny. But yeah, could he be Foundry CEO? Does he have the, I would say, requisite knowledge?
No. Yeah.
Yes.
Will there be an overall CEO again? Yeah. Just like Alphabet has an overall CEO, and Samsung has an overall CEO. Yeah. They aren't going to have a product CEO and a foundry CEO and an overall CEO. Yes, they are.
Yeah, that's almost exactly what they're going to have.
They have an Altera CEO, Sandra Rivera. Yeah. They have a Mobilar CEO, Professor Anil Shashua. I really should interview Sandra. But yeah.
There's going to be a product CEO, which is MJ. Who's Foundry CEO right
now? Kevin Buckley, I think.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure that he's interim Foundry CEO.
Sorry, he's senior vice president and GM of Foundry.
Oh, so he's not CEO. Okay.
But I think he's the most senior person at Foundry.
Yeah.
So
essentially interim and or acting CEO.
So he took over from what's the name? He took over from Stuart Pan, who took over from Randir Thacker.
Okay.
Thing is, Kevin's background is Marvell. He also served as VP of Product Development at GlobalFoundries and spent more than 17 years at IBM with tech development. So the reason why he got the job, or at least why the other guy left, is because of retirement. And the reason why the guy before him left is because he got offered CEO of Tata Technologies. So, yeah. So, yeah, we don't have a new... so just got here. Who's the new CEO? What we're doing here is literally playing a guessing game based on several announcements put together. It's based on what I heard from GloFo. Do I think Tom's going to be the next CEO? 3 out of 10. Do I think he's a good fit for CEO? 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
So, and let's go into some. There's going to be a question here. DSLAO4 says maybe GlobalFoundries and Intel Foundry doing some sort of strategic alliance. Probably not. They want competition. Right, drives prices down.
Yeah.
So, Thai Paradubs, just to be clear, this is just conjecture.
Yeah.
This headline here is worse than any headline I could come up with, because there should be a question mark, and then you should have... Actually, let's inspect that.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then Betteridge's law of headlines means no.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah, I wanted to cover that. I may even do that into a new video. Yeah. Do you want to cover the next topic, or shall we save it until next week?
Sure.
Because we're already almost 2 hours into this.
Yeah, we can make this short if you want to. What aspect do you want me to cover?
No, let's cover it next week. Okay. Just because I want to say there's nothing coming up in the next week, but if you want to know what we want to talk about, we'll bring this up next week. I didn't actually have it up, or I replaced it. We want to speak about this RISC-V core that George tested. If you and George and the team, Chester's done a great article over at chipsandcheese.com if you want to go read it ahead of next week. So let's see what happens. Again, it's long. It goes into detail about the core, and there's some performance metrics, standard chips and cheese stuff. And it keeps going, and yeah. So definitely go have a read about Alibaba's. I mean, it's 3 years old at this point, isn't it?
When was Hot Chips
21.
32. So yeah, 21. Yeah. So 4 years old.
Yeah. We'll talk about that next show. And Mark says hi. That's fun.
Hi, Mark.
Good to see you, Mark. Yeah, so that's yeah. If you've got any Q&A, pop them in now. You may have missed me mentioning that we're going to have an after show over on the Tech Potato voice chat when this finishes. If you want to get access to that, we're just going to have a casual breeze chill. Go head over to the Tech Potato Patreon, drop $1 in the tip bucket, and you'll get access to the Discord, where you get to talk to really amazing people, like-minded people who like to talk about technology, including George here. And you can also join our chat over there. For those of you wondering why it's a $1 or $2 in the tip jar, that's just because it stops spammers. It stops the bots. How do you feel about Jim Keller as an Intel CEO? He won't be CEO because he's too busy doing his own stuff. He really is. He's made his money and he's just having fun now. If you're interested in one of his investments, go read up on a company called Atomic Semi, which I need to go visit again. I haven't been there in over a year. I want to see how they're progressing. But yeah, with that, yeah, let's end it there. I hope you all have a good rest of week, weekend, and we'll see you next week. And then after that, I'm at ISSCC in a couple of weeks.
Okay, so maybe we'll have a tech Poutine at ISSCC.
Oh, are you going as well?
Yeah, I'm going. I'll be there.
Okay, yeah. One of my other events cancelled, so I'll be there for the whole event.
Okay.
And yeah, so we'll be at ISSCC and we'll be able to tell you about some of the new innovations. I've already seen some of the papers. They look pretty cool. Pretty cool, okay, if you like that sort of thing, as we do here. But yes, thank you all for watching. As always, I've been your co-host, Ian from Tech Potato.
And I am George from Chips and Cheese.
Go and subscribe over to the Chips and Cheese YouTube channel and over on their Substack. And we will see you in the after show if you're going to be there, or next week. But good to see from you all, as always.
Have a good one, folks.